Beyond the boundaries of our world, some stories define what it means to be human. This is Of the World, Missions Beyond Earth. February 1st, 2003, 8:59 in the morning, Central Standard Time. A spacecraft carrying 7 astronauts is streaking across the sky above Texas at 12,500 miles per hour. They are 16 minutes from home. Their families are waiting at the runway. The champagne is on ice. And inside the left wing of the orbiter Columbia, there is a hole, punched through the carbon panels 81 seconds after launch, 16 days ago, that no one on Earth decided to look at. In 16 minutes, the people who could have looked will wish they had for the rest of their lives. This is the story of Columbia. Space Shuttle Columbia, designation STS-107, carried a crew of 7. They were scientists, pilots, and engineers who had spent years earning the right to fly. Commander Rick Husband was an Air Force colonel from Amarillo, Texas, on his second shuttle mission. Pilot William McCool was making his very first spaceflight. Mission specialists Michael Anderson, David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, and Laurel Clark brought expertise in physics, medicine, and engineering. Payload specialist Ilan Ramon was a fighter pilot and the first Israeli astronaut. Ramon carried with him a pencil drawing of the Earth as seen from space, made by Peter Ginz, who had drawn it from imagination inside the Theresienstadt concentration camp before being murdered at Auschwitz in 1944. The drawing survived the Holocaust. It would not survive Columbia. Columbia launched on January 16, 2003, from Kennedy Space Center. 81.7 seconds after liftoff, traveling at roughly 1,500 miles per hour, a briefcase-sized chunk of insulating foam broke away from the external tank and struck the leading edge of Columbia's left wing. The impact lasted 0.2 of a second. It punched a hole roughly 6 to 10 inches wide in a carbon-carbon panel designed to protect the orbiter from temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during re-entry. The foam weighed less than 2 pounds, but traveling at orbital velocity, it hit with the force of a 750-pound object at 500 miles per hour. Engineers on the ground reviewed launch footage, but the system designed to protect these 7 lives failed them. Not because the technology broke, but because the culture did. In the days following launch, a group of NASA engineers began raising alarms. The footage showed a large piece impacting a critical area, and they wanted answers. Rodney Rocha, co-chair of the debris assessment team, requested that the Department of Defense photograph the wing using spy satellites or ground telescopes. It was a simple, potentially life-saving request. The request was denied, never even reaching the flight director. Other engineers ran models using crater software, which was designed for tiny ice impacts and predicted minor damage. Linda Ham, chair of the mission management team, asked, "Can we even do anything about it?" The implied answer, no, became the official position. If they could not fix the problem, there was no point confirming it existed. This logic would kill 7 people. While engineers debated, the crew had no idea anything was wrong. They spent 16 days conducting 80 scientific experiments, studying flames in microgravity, growing protein crystals, and monitoring their own bodies. Kalpana Chawla operated fluid physics experiments, while Laurel Clark emailed her family about watching lightning storms below. David Brown documented spiders' webs in zero gravity. Ilan Ramon kept a diary, noting how strange it was to see the entire Middle East as a single, borderless landscape from 200 miles up. Nations that could not share a table could not even be distinguished from orbit. The crew was doing exactly what space exploration was supposed to be, learning and marveling. On the morning of February 1st, they strapped back into their seats and fired the deorbit burn. They were coming home. At 8:40 in the morning, Columbia crossed the California coastline at 230,000 feet, traveling at 23 times the speed of sound. The leading edges of the wings were absorbing temperatures of nearly 3,000 degrees, but Panel 8 left was not intact. Superheated plasma poured through the breach in the left wing. Inside the structure, aluminum spars were suddenly exposed to temperatures exceeding 5,000 degrees. At 8:53, Mission Control began seeing anomalous sensor readings. Temperature sensors inside the wing spiked and failed, one after another. Tire pressure sensors on the left gear dropped to 0. At 8:59, the capsule communicator called, "Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages." Commander Husband replied, "Roger," and then static. The transmission cut off mid-word. That half-spoken syllable was the last sound ever heard from the crew. At 9 in the morning, residents across East Texas and western Louisiana heard thundering booms. They looked up and saw dozens of white streaks fanning across the sky. Columbia had broken apart at an altitude of 200,000 feet. Debris scattered across a corridor 250 miles long. More than 25,000 searchers walked shoulder to shoulder through forests to collect fragments. They found flight helmets, tiles, and charred pages from Elon Ramon's diary. NASA recovered roughly 40% of the orbiter by weight. The crew's remains were identified and returned to their families. There were no survivors. The Columbia Accident Investigation Board, chaired by retired Admiral Harold Gaiman, spent 7 months examining every fragment, email, and decision. Their physical finding was straightforward. Foam struck the wing's carbon-carbon leading edge during ascent, creating a breach that allowed superheated gases to penetrate the wing during re-entry, leading to vehicle breakup. But the board identified something far more dangerous than foam. They identified a culture of normalized deviance, where unacceptable risks became accepted anomalies because previous flights had returned safely. The same pattern had killed 7 astronauts on Challenger 17 years earlier, when O-ring warnings were overruled. 2 shuttles, 14 astronauts, the same institutional failure repeated across 2 decades. The board investigated whether the crew could have been saved. Their conclusion was agonizing. If NASA had acknowledged the severity of the foam strike, 2 options existed. First, Columbia's crew could have remained in orbit while NASA prepared an emergency rescue mission using the shuttle Atlantis, which was already being processed for a March launch. Second, the crew could have attempted a repair using onboard materials, filling the breach with water and wet wipes and freezing them in the cold of space. Modeling showed this crude repair might have allowed them to survive re-entry. Neither option was attempted. The question was never asked. Rodney Rocha, who had requested the satellite imagery, later said, "I will live with that for the rest of my life." After Columbia, NASA grounded the shuttle fleet for 2.5 years. Every subsequent mission carried an inspection camera, and procedures were created to dock at the space station if damage was detected. The shuttle program itself ended in 2011. Today, the lessons of Columbia are taught worldwide as a failure of organizational culture. Normalization of deviance has become a foundational concept in safety science. It is the reason a junior engineer today has the authority and the obligation to stop a process if something looks wrong. 7 people died because the people who knew something was wrong were not empowered to act. That is Columbia's lesson, and it applies far beyond space. Rick Husband, William McCool, Michael Anderson, David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, Laurel Clark, Elon Ramon. 7 names, 7 families, 7 seats that were full on the morning of February 1st, 2003, and empty by 9 o'clock. They did not die because a piece of foam fell off a fuel tank. They died because an institution that had already learned this lesson, at the cost of 7 other lives, 17 years earlier, chose to forget it. Columbia's crew believed they were coming home. They had every reason to believe it. They had done everything right. The system they trusted did not do the same. On the debris field in East Texas, searchers found a patch from Elon Ramon's flight suit. Stitched onto it was the flag of Israel, and beside it, a small embroidered image of the Earth as seen from space, inspired by the drawing of a boy who never lived to see the sky. This has been Of the World, Missions Beyond Earth. Look up tonight. The universe is still out there, waiting.